Are you ready on Zoom?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
All right, we'll start the meeting with a roll call.
Put that on. There we go. Commissioner Lazar,
Here.
Commissioner Freitas,
Here.
Commissioner Mayer,
Present.
Commissioner Kraft,
Present.
and Commissioner Benson.
Present.
Thank you.
Benson for Benson. Thank you. Commissioner Benson, would you like to lead the salute for the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's like,
Do I always feel like I'm
Elementary school,
saying
I
it
did
wrong
that.
the whole time? Thank you. It looks like we don't have minutes, so we'll move through and open for oral communications. There is nobody in attendance. Any? Okay, this would be the opportunity if you have something that you would like to be heard about that is not on the agenda, then now would be your time. All right, we'll close oral communications and move through to new business for the general plan annual progress report for the year 2024.
Okay, great. Good evening, commissioners. Deputy Director of Development Services, Caitlin Castellano here. I'm going to present on the General Plan Annual Progress Report for 2024. California Government Code Section 65400 requires that the city submit an annual progress report, and I'm going to call it the APR here on forward, on the implementation of its general plan to the city council and the state by April 1st of each year. The general plan APR included in your agenda packet highlights key accomplishments in implementing the city's 2040 general plan during the calendar year 2024. The accomplishments are organized under their respective general plan goals, and a snippet of what it looks like is shown on the slide. This is the second year we have done it in this format, and it's more comprehensive than last year's report because we were able to hear from other departments, include their accomplishments like code enforcement and EPD and Humboldt Bay Fire, which is really exciting. And in the future, we're hoping to be even more comprehensive and make this report more user-friendly and maybe have some pictures of our accomplishments. But for now, we're just trying to get all the information in it. So I know I went over this last year, but I'll go over it again quickly. You might ask, what is a general plan? A general plan can be described as the local government's blueprint for how the city or county will grow and develop. It is required by our California Government Code Section 65300 and has a long-term planning horizon of 20 to 25 years. The city's 2040 general plan lays out the future of the city's development in general terms through a series of policy statements and maps, and is the supreme document from which all local land use decisions must derive. As you can see by this land use planning hierarchy pyramid I pulled off the internet, the general plan is at the top and is the most long-term general planning document. All the plans, maps, permits, lower down on the pyramid must be consistent with the general plan. The general plan is the guiding document for all land use development and resource decisions. So all general plans in California must include 7 mandatory elements: land use, housing, open space, conservation, safety, circulation, and noise. But it can include additional optional elements that speak to other topics of local interest. The 2040 general plan's required and optional elements are presented in 5 sections, which provide the goals and policies to guide the city's short-term and long-term decision-making. So section 3.1, our community, is relating to land use and housing. And it's important to note, and you probably already know, that the housing element is under a separate cover, and Director Kenyon will provide an update on that next. The section 3.1, our community, also includes information on our economy, historic and cultural preservation. There are 40 topics in the APR table related to our community in this section. Section 3.2, our environment, is relating to natural resources and open space, agriculture and timberlands, and air quality and climate change. There are 5 topics in the APR table related to our environment. Section 3.3, our civic resources, relating to arts and culture, parks and recreation, community services. There are 23 topics in the APR table related to our civic resources. And then section 3.4, our infrastructure, relating to mobility and utilities. There are 21 topics in the APR table related to our infrastructure. And lastly, section 3.5, our well-being, relating to health and safety and noise. There are 12 topics in the APR table related to our well-being. And in total, there are 101 topics associated with accomplishments in our general plan APR. Wow, that's exciting. All right. Next, I'll share a little timeline for development and approval of the general plan to wrap up this presentation. In 2013, the city embarked on a comprehensive update to its general plan, which had last been updated in 1997. The update process involved extensive community outreach and engagement over 5 years, including stakeholder interviews, community workshops, web-based virtual town halls, focus groups, landowner requests, city council and planning commission check-in sessions, an EIR scoping meeting, general plan update website, flyers, media releases, and public hearings. In October of 2018, the 2040 general plan was adopted, and then 6 months later, the city began the housing element update. And in December of 2019, the 2019 through 2027 housing element was adopted. Although the housing element is a component of the general plan, they are on different cycles where the housing element is updated every 8 years, while general plans are every 20 to 25 years. Not shown on here are 4 general plan amendments that were adopted after year 2020 to change land use and then zoning designations on specific parcels. So 2 of those occurred in 2022 and 2 occurred last year in 2024. There was also 1 amendment to the housing element that you probably all remember in 2022 to delete and add sites to city-owned parcels for implementation program IMP H34, affordable housing on publicly owned properties, and to make necessary updates and corrections throughout the document and technical appendix. So the recommendation tonight is to receive the 2040 General Plan APR. This report is scheduled to go before the City Council at their regular meeting on March 18th. And then once the report is accepted next week, then we'll submit it to the Department of Housing and Community Development, also known as HCD, as well as the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, which was formerly the Governor's Office of Planning and Research, OPR. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to H2, the housing element annual progress report.
Did you want to take any comment from the
sure.
public or? We don't have to, but we usually do though.
Yeah, that's fine. We could move back to H1, and if you guys have questions. Oh, I really did squash your enthusiasm there. Sorry. My apologies.
I just had a question. I noticed, there's a lot, obviously, as you went over, Caitlin, good job. Just that one thing that caught my eye in the report was about the neighborhood mini grants, and I'd never heard of those before, and I wondered who's eligible and how does the process work and what money is there. And this is
That's one of our most popular programs, and it pays for like block parties, and any resident or business can get one and do something like. I think Swan, our economic development director, told me that maybe some businesses in Henderson Center use one to like try to put up a mini library or something. You can use them for all sorts of stuff.
I think the Boys and Girls Club did like a Halloween block party over there on Peace Street.
And is there a limit to how much you can get under one of these grants?
Yeah, and I don't know that.
Okay, well, that's cool. I'd never heard of them before. And I think, can we just make sure if that's the only one?
I feel like when we applied for one before to do an event, it was like $1,000.
Okay. And then the vacancy ordinance, was that a general plan implementation measure?
It was not specifically in the general plan, no.
Okay.
It was in the city council strategic visioning that they do every 2 years.
Right.
And then is the ADU financing program and the ADU loan program the same thing?
Yes.
And is it like taking money from TOT and then kind of redirecting it to, has anyone taken that up?
We're still building the program because what we're trying to do is partner with a local bank so that we will give the initial loan to get people through design, permitting, and construction, and then they can get that loan refinanced with the bank and we can get the money back to use it again.
Okay. And then I guess this was something, and this might be better for the housing element discussion, but more just about the pro-housing designation. So maybe I'll wait for that. Yeah.
You can just ask it now.
Okay. So, one thing that was surprising to me when the kind of controversy surrounding the city development of parking lots was circling was that, from my experience in planning, local jurisdictions, plan for a certain density, create policies that they think are going to provide pathways for achieving certain residential outcomes in terms of multifamily or single family, different types of housing. But that's the end of the agency's involvement. There's still always the private sector investment, and like the people on the other side of the counter are the ones that come in with the projects. But in our case, we have this city development of parking lots policy that tracks back to the general plan, but was probably inserted as part of a housing element effort. That's kind of what I was thinking. So, and that was, I think I spoke with city manager Slattery. Was that because we were trying to get that pro-housing designation that policy emerged, or was it independent of all that?
No, when that emerged, we weren't even thinking about pro-housing yet. I don't think it was even a thing yet when we adopted the housing element. But at that time, because we're built out, we couldn't identify adequate vacant sites, specifically for low and very low. We didn't have a bunch of vacant land in Myrtletown that's got wetlands on it that we could just assign units to. No shade. But so just like Arcata had to adopt the gateway plan, we had to do something additional. We had to do an implementation measure. But we do need that. We needed that to get the pro-housing designation because the pro-housing designation was a point system with 4 categories, and one of the categories was putting city money towards housing. Right. And that's really, until we get we just started this local housing trust fund, and we're trying to build this ADU financing program. But apart from that, us putting up land for housing is the only real financial investment we're making in housing.
Yeah, if I could just clarify, I think from what I remember as well is that the city was trying to use little tiny lots and ADUs to cover the RENA requirement for the lower income. So and the state didn't like that, right? Like Kristen said, we needed larger sites that could accommodate it, because generally when you're doing lower income housing, it's like a larger development project. It's not like sprinkled.
Yeah, they wanted sites that were greater than a half acre, less than they wanted a specific size that we don't have. We have all tiny infill sites. That was also an issue.
So if we had adequate land that was sized appropriately, we may have not ever needed to target city-owned property, but that's really a byproduct of the shortage of land that met the criteria for.
Yeah, I feel like our other options are requiring maybe an inclusionary housing, where we require anybody who wants to develop housing in the city to build affordable housing, or annexing Myrtletown. I don't know.
Okay, I think that's it on that. Yeah, that's all I got for general plan. Thanks.
But this doesn't require a vote, right? It's just receiving the report, right? Okay. Anyone else? Questions, comments? Okay, now we'll forge ahead. I was just really excited about the housing element. So we'll move on to the annual progress report.
I'm only going to go through a few slides, but I have a bunch of other slides in case there's questions or interest. Just like with the general plan, we also have to do an annual report specific to the housing element. And like Caitlin mentioned, where our housing element needs to be updated every 8 years. It's called the sixth cycle that we're in, 2019 through 2027. The State Department of Housing and Community Development, it's actually the Department of Finance plus HCD determine the regional housing needs allocation for every region in the state. And in this housing element cycle, Humboldt was assigned a RHNA of needing 3,390 net new housing units for the 2019 through 2027 cycle. And the state also divided those into income levels, very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. And then the Humboldt County Association of Governments allocates that regional RHNA amongst all Humboldt County cities and counties. And Eureka received a RHNA of 952 units, which is 28% of the countywide RHNA. I believe it was based on your percentage of residents and your percentage of employment, and just an average of those two. So again, our RHNA for the city is divided into income levels. And when we say we need 231 very low income units, that means we want units that are affordable to people who are earning a certain amount of money. And affordable means spending less than 30% of your monthly income on housing. If you spend over that, you're considered rent burdened. And we report on a bunch of different things in our housing element annual progress report. We tally how many complete permit applications we received in 2024, how many building permits we approved, and then issued. Approved is when we're like, yes, you have a complete application, and then we tell them what the fee is, and when they pay the fee, then we issue the permit and they can begin construction. And then we also tally how many get to the final stage where they have their final inspection and they're finaled and they get their certificate of occupancy granted. This is interesting to me. HCD tracks progress towards RHNA based on the number of building permits issued each year. So you get your unit counted towards your RHNA when you issue the building permit and they begin construction, not when they finish construction and get their certificate of occupancy. And so it gets confusing when you're looking at the housing element reporting. It's on a form that HCD gives us that we have to use because the same housing development can show up on multiple years. So for instance, the Laurel Canyon Senior Housing Project at 7th and Myrtle, they applied for their first permit in 2020. So they show up in that APR. And then they got their building permit approved in 2022 and issued in that year. And then they got their final certificate of occupancy at the very beginning of 2024. So they show up in 2020, not in 2021, in 2022, and then not in 2023, and then again in 2024. So just looking at 2024 reporting, this first map is building permits issued for housing in 2024. So we had 46 housing units under 27 separate projects, 4 single-family homes, 12 2 to 4 unit structures, this is the number of units, not 12 2 to 4 unit structures, but 12 units and 2 to 4 unit in like duplex to quadplexes, 1 5-plex, and then 25 ADUs. And this is pretty consistent. I think our number of ADUs last year was like 21 or something. We've been slowly rising, and it's predominantly ADUs that get developed every year. And then, except when we have a big deed restricted affordable development project, and then that's when we get a bigger number. So this is building permits final. Like I mentioned, 7th and Myrtle was final this year, so it accounts for a lot of these units. So in terms of units finaled, where we have a new unit for somebody to live in this year, or this past year, it was 76 in 22 separate projects. Okay, so this is what our progress on RENA looks like in our housing element, APR that we give to HCD. And it's populated based on our reporting in past years. And we totally failed to report on some big projects. So this is not accurate. And I need to send HCD corrections to our old reports. If based on my review of it, we actually are further ahead because we were missing some key stuff. The 20 units that are the Eureka Kamek Place motel conversion on 4th and 3rd, and then 7th and Myrtle. We failed to put that in when we issued the building permit for it, and then the 48 units on 4th Street, the Providence Supportive Housing. So when you look at all of it, we've made a lot of progress on our low income units. But we still have a long way to go. So we've built 28% of our RENA, and we still have 72% to go. One thing I want to highlight is that development in Eureka is not happening with like big out of the area developers with big subdivisions or anything like that, because we're built out. It's all really, individual. There's a lot of like individual owner builders, and there's a lot of small developers who are just starting out. And that's really cool to see. And it's really exciting to see especially these smaller subdivisions that we're getting that are creating these housing units, because we have our 2019 comprehensive inland zoning code update to thank. And I just want to highlight that from when we first adopted a comprehensive zoning code in 1966 until 2019, small lots were prohibited in our zoning code. So these are an example. These lots were built, and the houses were built pre-1960, and then we prohibited this from happening. But with our 2019 update, smaller lot sizes are now permitted. So we've re-legalized this. You can go as small as 2,000 square feet in multifamily residential zones. And we've taken out the minimum lot depth and width requirements. We just say your lot has to be buildable, meaning you can site a structure and access to it. And then also, we don't make the lot have street frontage. Alley access or an easement is okay. And so one small subdivision that we counted some units on is this one, where they took this existing lot, and with the new code, they were able to break it into 2,000 square foot lots, some of which are accessed via an alley. And on those, they're building one single family home and one ADU. And so there's, last year also, we created a bunch of pamphlets about different like educational promotional material about housing, and you can find that on our website. And we also have a Talk Eureka page all about our affordable housing on city-owned lots, if you want to read more about that. That's it for my report.
All right, thank you. Questions, comments?
I have a few. I'm pleasantly surprised about the ADUs. I didn't know that we were building at that level. Did I hear this right, that we're in year 6 out of 8 with those stats?
Well, this is reporting for 2024. So we have 25, 26, and we have till August of 27.
So 5/8 of the way through. Okay. So I agree with you that we're built out with a couple of asterisks on that. Any word or movement on Jacobs or the balloon track, kind of the two bigger pieces that come to mind?
I know those are large sites that could potentially accommodate housing.
And are you guys hearing anything about Jacobs since the election?
I haven't heard anything, but our city manager might have. But no, yeah, nobody has called the way they're calling about Kmart and pulling info. And the other one, the balloon track, there was, they did the initial cleanup, and the next phase was going to be to evaluate that. And I did get a call from their consultant maybe like a couple months ago, just saying, they're still working on it.
Very fine report. Thank you.
I can let you know that we did issue a CDP for phase 1 of 2 phases for the cleanup of the balloon track. There's more cleanup that has to happen under the water board. Right now, they had to remove a bunch of concrete and all the structures there to get underneath it to do more sampling to see the full extent of remaining contamination. Then after they do that and it comes back, then they have to come for another CDP to actually take out the rest of the dirty soil that's there or whatever happens with the report. But yeah, as far as development, no. But at least they're moving on.
Well, I'm
cleaning stuff up there.
encouraging them to think through development as part of the second phase, because there's a bunch of pocket wetlands out there, which complicates the coastal development permitting. And having it be a remediation project at the same time as you're thinking about future development, it helps thread the needle to get to an approval.
I like it.
One thing that is going to be hard is the above moderate numbers. They tend to be pretty high, and it's like, where are we going to build them? Do you guys have any strategies about that you're kicking around? Because Arcata is pretty stumped by that one.
I know. I heard that Arcata meets their low income arena every year and not their above moderate.
Yeah, we're really good at the low, but it's harder to figure out where to build when you're built out.
Yeah, I mean, we had a few above. Yeah, it's tough. I mean,
we approved that subdivision for Lumber Hills.
Right. So there's a potential. I've also been talking to Bill Barnum about other property he owns. There's Will Adams mixed use projects. Those units above the first floor are definitely luxury. And then there's that giant vacant lot at J Street on the waterfront. That could be luxury condos. Like, luxury condos is my only thought. Or if anybody else has ideas.
I saw Bill too, and he mentioned that he was perhaps building a larger, more like moderate and low income subdivision. Is that coming through anytime soon, or is it kind of just still kind of pie in the sky?
We supplied him with just information on development standards and stuff. He's considering we have a conservation subdivision in the R1 in the in the low density residential that allows you to cluster all your development together if you keep the other 50% or more of the site open space. And that would be like the first time somebody uses it since we had it. So that's exciting. But he is not the only property owner, and that complicates it.
You mentioned in the report the discrepancy between the median income that we have technically versus what we're asked to use. I was kind of confused by that. So one is the 60,000 per year, and the other was 88. Help me. I just trying to wrap my head around, like, so it's HCD wants us to use a higher number.
HCD publishes that number for the purpose of determining affordability for grant-funded, deed-restricted affordable housing.
Okay.
And like who qualifies for those rental units.
Okay, and then I noticed some stats on Mills Act and some of the things that went to the Historic Preservation Commission. And I thought I would just point out something I saw on Facebook. Somebody posted on March 3rd. It's this Victorians of Humboldt County group, and they say the Victorian houses are Eureka's greatest asset. Probably just wishful thinking, but I think owners of historic buildings should be offered a tax incentive to better maintain their homes. That would help
Perfect.
prevent many of these houses from deteriorating further. So, I pointed out there's the Historic Preservation Tax Credit, and we have a Mills Act program where they're like, well, I've never heard of that. So just,
We do have a housing element implementation measure to advertise the Mills Act.
social media might be a good target, it sounds like, from my recent experience. So maybe some better opportunities there. I think that's it for housing element.
I think it's going to be hard to reach the higher income levels just because the lack of high paying jobs in the area. So to achieve that would be, we need to bring in higher paying jobs, different industries, just to meet that, like, as you say, like the lower level ADUs. It's because it's more affordable, and I just think it's going to be pretty hard to meet that threshold without more industry coming. That's just my personal opinion on that. So I don't know, like, what's being done or thought of in that regard, but I think that it's just going to be near impossible to reach that until we have more industry, better paying jobs as a whole.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the state, they think we need above moderate units. They think that we have people that want those or need those, and that's why they assign those to us.
Yeah, I don't know if that's...
I've heard that, doctors struggle to find places to live in the area, but there is just a general preference in the United States for large, giant houses on large lots for certain, for certain people. So, and we just can't provide that in Eureka other than potentially like a few places.
I think I sat in some conversations with the chamber and their conversations with Providence that they were kind of trying to do those things at the same time, build houses that might then attract doctors. And so you kind of have to have both those things happening. I also think that port project out there on Samoa was hoping to drive more executive level tax brackets in. So I think there is some work getting done, but it's definitely slow going. But there's some important conversations definitely happening with the chambers of commerce regarding that.
Yeah, just to your point, Chairman and Mayor, the Eureka Chamber has an Industry Affairs and Government Affairs Committee. I'm probably not titling that exactly right, and that's exactly the topic of their meeting tomorrow.
And I was gonna say those meetings are open to the public, so any of you could Zoom or drop in and take a listen. All right, anything else? Okay, we'll move to staff reports and communications.
All right, I was gonna do a little mini report on the Waterfront Eureka specific plan, but Caitlin, did you want to?
Updates? Yeah. So we have a couple updates on staffing changes. Senior planner Lisa Savage retired, so we're very happy for her. She was at the city for 26 years in various roles. So I think she was a senior planner for like the last 5 years. I know she was promoted to that when I first started. And we have 3 new assistant planners. So it's Kristen, me, Raylene, and three new assistant planners and one assistant that has been with us now for a year and a half, Alex Gonzalez. So our new assistant planners is Taylor Rayburn. They are a temp assistant planner. And then we also have Henry Baker and Sam Grifford, and they are our permanent new assistant senior planners. And then we have flown a position for a new senior planner. So if you know of anyone that would like to apply, please share that announcement with them. I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay. And before I forget, we have another outreach event around the ASIC grant for Sunset Heights. It's a community walk that is slated for, it doesn't say what day it is.
March 20th, I think.
Anyway, it'll be advertised.
I did remember one more thing. And then we're actually holding a community meeting on March 26th here in the council chambers and via Zoom. I'm sorry, I'm blanking out if it's 5:30 or 6:30 for the WIOT housing projects. So that's exciting. That'll be Wednesday, March 26th. And we have put a flyer in our newsletter, and then tomorrow we should be getting the information out to our social media.
And then also the County of Humboldt is hosting a meeting on the Climate Action Plan Environmental Impact Report on March 18th at 6 p.m. at the Wharfinger. Okay, so next month, your next meeting in April, I'm hoping to bring the Waterfront specific plan for adoption. And so I wanted to bring forward just some key parts of it that have changed since you last viewed it. That are the land use designations and the zoning information. And as I explained in my report, it was based primarily on comments we got back from the Coastal Commission about prioritizing coastal act priority uses, and then also this capstone project that these 4 Cal Poly Humboldt students did for us, inventorying and doing a walk, a community walk in Old Town. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about Old Town regulations because they are an ongoing struggle for everybody involved. So our general plan and the upcoming specific plan, it divides Old Town and downtown by 3rd Street, which doesn't make sense logically for people. They feel like the south side of 3rd Street is as much part of Old Town as the north side. But the reason for that is because that's the coastal zone boundary. So from a regulatory standpoint, it simplifies things. And so this is the Old Town mapped by the general plan. And it goes all the way to J Street on the east side and B Street on the west side. So it's quite a large area versus what we often think of as the core part of that, which is closer to E and F. So stepping back, development in the coastal zone requires a coastal development permit, and development is defined broadly to include density and changes in density and intensity of use is considered development. And the Coastal Commission delegates permitting authority to local governments with a certified local coastal program. And then the city then has the authority to approve coastal development permits if they're consistent with the city's local coastal program. So the Coastal Act was adopted in 1976. We didn't have a certified LCP until the late 80s. So there was a long stretch where the Coastal Commission was doing the permitting in our coastal zone. Local coastal programs include the Coastal Act related portions of your general plan and your coastal zoning code. And changes to your local coastal program require certification by the Coastal Commission. And they won't certify it unless it conforms with the Coastal Act. And when we're talking about Old Town, a key thing about the Coastal Act is it prioritizes certain uses over others. specifically coastal related and coastal dependent uses. And then also Coastal Act Section 30222 says the use of private land suitable for visitor serving commercial recreational facilities designed to enhance public opportunities for coastal recreation shall have priority over private residential, general industrial, or general commercial development, but not over agriculture or coastal dependent industry. So the city's LCP implemented this in part and continues to by prioritizing visitor serving uses in Old Town. What constitutes visitor serving commercial? There's no definition in the Coastal Act. Our current LCP that was adopted in the late 80s defines it as public or private development that provides accommodations, food and services, hotels, motels, campgrounds, commercial rec, shopping, eating, and amusement areas for tourists. So it's been considered to be tourist-oriented uses that are visitor serving. And right now, Old Town and the Commercial Bayfront, they're both zoned the same, waterfront commercial, and principally permitted uses are limited to coastal dependent, coastal related, and tourist oriented uses. And everything else needs a conditional use permit. And it's the list of principally permitted visitor serving uses. The uses are way too specific so that this list is always incomplete and limiting. And it's also dated. Like we still have some really crazy old uses in our coastal zoning code that haven't been uses for a long time, like telegraph delivery shops. Versus our inland code, pretty much all of this stuff would fall under one use category, general retail indoor small. So all these conditions, so if you're not one of those tourist oriented things or coastal dependent or coastal related, you need a conditional use permit, which also triggers the need for a coastal development permit, which triggers the need for a public notice and a hearing and a staff report making tons and tons of findings. So it's a lot of money. And it also triggers CEQA because the city's taking a discretionary action. And that's a real barrier to adaptive reuse of vacant space. Also, all these neighborhood serving commercial uses that aren't tourist oriented also need a conditional use permit, like barbershops, nail salons, corner markets, tattoo parlors, pharmacies. And so that's a barrier to complete communities where you have services that people need in their day-to-day life. And not just stores selling beach towels. And then even residences and offices on upper floors need conditional use permits, which is where we want to prioritize residential and office space. And so this results in offices and wanting to be on the ground floor because it's just as easy or hard either way. And there's some pros and cons of ground floor street facing offices. Pros, they fill vacant space and their employees dine and shop in the area, supporting the destinations. But the cons is they aren't a destination, so they don't generate foot traffic. They have less visual interest for pedestrians. And because they can theoretically function just as well without a street facing storefront, ideally they wouldn't be competing with businesses that do really need that street facing storefront to thrive. And individually they're fine, but if over time, if all of Old Town became just ground floor offices, it would lose its vibe and it would become an office district. Like there's California Department of Fish and Wildlife's office is not very fun to walk by, but there's a whole bunch of shops on the other side. They're not contributing. But that's fine because there's just one of them. But if the other side of the street also became a government office, then Old Town would change completely, So the vision for Old Town in the draft plan is to fill vacancies, continue this legacy of cultural and historic of being a cultural and historic district with tourism, shopping, and recreation, but also allowing more offices and residences so that it can be more vibrant around the clock and there's more people there supporting the destinations, and also a complete community serving locals as well as tourists. And so there's some key updates to the regulations that I'm going to highlight that are trying to do that. Number one, most obvious, allowing residences and offices on upper floors without a conditional use permit. Number two, treating the back side of the ground floor like the upper floors and allowing residences and offices without a conditional use permit. Number three, for the ground floor street facing uses, instead of having a list of okay uses, instead we want to have performance standards. And so the idea is limiting them to active ground floor dependent uses, which are defined as uses that are reliant on pedestrian and foot traffic, open to the general public during regular business hours, and selling goods consumed on premise or carried away, or personal recreational services. So not selling cars or something like, so for instance, somebody came in recently and they want to open a water distribution in a prime corner storefront. And so we would be asking them, are you open to the general public, or are you membership only? Like, could a tourist come in and buy water, or would it, have to have your water container and do you sell other things? Are you open for a significant number of hours a week, or are you just open for a few hours a week? Stuff like that, to see if they could fit this active ground floor use definition or not, depending on their operational characteristics. Another thing is shrinking the area where only visitor serving or active ground floor uses are allowed. We saw this in Half Moon Bay's local coastal program, the update that they got certified by the Coastal Commission. They limit their Heritage Main Street to active ground floor uses, which is a subset of their Heritage Downtown, which is a subset of their downtown designation. So using this idea and using the data from the Cal Poly students' inventory of the ground floor, we kind of figured out a smaller area where we would have that active ground floor use limitation applying. And it would only apply to new buildings and existing tenant spaces with transparent storefronts at eye level from the adjacent sidewalk or public plaza. So if you're in an existing building where the windows are up high, you wouldn't need to comply with it because people aren't going to see what you're doing anyway. And then there's also form-based standards that I'll get to next that would apply. And then in the white areas that are further out from the central core of Old Town, only the form-based standards would apply. And so it would be looser on use. And the form-based standards are, for new buildings, a minimum floor-to-ceiling height of 12 feet from the ground floor, minimum 65% transparency facing the street between 3 and 7 feet above the sidewalk. And then for existing buildings, you just can't become more non-conforming with the standard. So if you're at 30% transparency, you just can't go down to 25%. You can stay at 30. And then requirement to use your transparent storefront during operating hours. So keeping at least 75% of the total glass area transparent and having visually interesting displays and or business activities that are highly visible to pedestrians on the sidewalk. So you should be able to look in and see people getting their hair cut or exercising or printing on a printing press or whatever it is. So that's where we're headed. And I presented this to Main Street Board yesterday morning.
What was their feedback?
It was positive. Of course, Councilmember Castellano had like 20 additional good ideas that I now have to figure out like how to incorporate. Like she was thinking that there could be a situation where if the vacancy rate gets high enough that we could then waive the active ground floor use requirement.
Is the city currently doing a comprehensive vacancy rate analysis at any kind of regular interval?
No, the students that did the inventory last year, they didn't see very many vacancies. There at that time, there was a lot of vacancies on the south side of 3rd Street, but not much in Old Town. But since then, there's quite a few more vacancies since then. And I feel like it's very dynamic in Old Town.
Yeah, my point just being that it's a good idea, but would require some kind of regular checking, on what the vacancy was. I did have one other comment. Could we go back to the slide with the pedestrian focused frontages really quickly? Just staring at my face. It's always just strange. Okay, so I just want to say, first of all, that I'm super excited about this plan, and I know we're on a kind of time limitation to complete it, and I love the intent. I love the plan. One thing, though, that I know we've talked about and still annoys me, so I'm going to just say it, is that there is sort of this kind of die-off of pedestrian-focused frontages leading up to the Carson Mansion, from like H&I all the way up to M or wherever the Carson Mansion is. And there's like the Humboldt County Courtyard and all these things that are super uninteresting leading up to one of our largest tourism draws. I would just like to reiterate that I think it would make sense to focus more attention on form-based standards along 2nd Street, leading between the core of Old Town to the Carson Mansion, trying to encourage some of those weird legacy uses to relocate elsewhere. That's my 2 cents. Just wanted to say that. Otherwise,
I thought about that. And the issue is that the library district is an office residential district. And so we actually support like 100% residential development in the library district. And so the 65% transparency is really intended for storefronts. Like you wouldn't require 100% residential development to have their first floor be all glass. Maybe a corner of it, but and there's certain things you can do with resident. I mean, we will have adopted the design standards, not allowing blank walls and this and that, but I don't think we can require storefronts along. Plus, I just don't know if we can handle that many storefronts. We're kind of like if you've read how much retail square footage there is in America compared to other countries, it's insane per capita. And we can't even keep our current ones. Like our vacancy rate is somewhat high, and especially in downtown. And so I just would worry about requiring more storefronts. But if that's not where you're going with that, so it would be different. We are going to adopt design standards, but they're not going to be the PFF, which is about having the transparent storefronts.
Yeah, I don't have like a great answer for this necessarily, but maybe if there was a way to like discourage or prohibit certain uses, making sure that they couldn't expand or locate new, like no more courtyards, or
we have 2 policies about that in our general plan, like please Humboldt County relocate your courtyard, and we're like actively encouraging that they do. But
Yeah, and even a residential development could have, you know, a lobby with glass or something to just make sure it's inviting. I totally agree about, you know, we have enough retail, but I just want to make sure that along 2nd Street, there's some amount of like acknowledgement of that being a corridor that should be beautified.
I hear you.
So that's my comment. I don't know what the solution is. I'm sure there's already something in here that kind of speaks to that, but it would seem like a missed opportunity if we didn't continue to discourage inappropriate uses and encourage whatever we consider to be appropriate uses along 2nd Street. And that's my comment.
The library district, we are going to have I think we're going to have a minimum, or you have to be up against the street to contribute to the street wall. Like, what other standards do you think would be good?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important one is setbacks and parking areas, landscaping, and transparency are the other ones I can think of. Maybe having like doors located from the street as opposed to like from the side of the building, encouraging sort of active street frontages where people feel safe. You know, I think that's the other thing is you get past H Street and you're like, I don't know if I'm really supposed to be here. It's kind of like not as inviting, you know? So
Yeah.
whatever would make it feel more active and inviting and that's a very tourism specific thing, you know, because if you're from here, you know, you just keep walking and you find the Carson Mansion. But the number of times I've been walking in Old Town and had somebody be like, is this the right way? Is it up here? You know?
Yeah.
It just seems to be a common problem.
I wonder if there's other ways to strengthen that connection with public art and things like that.
Painting the street, you know, I know that's kind of controversial, but Arcata did the green and gold corridor, right, where they striped up to the university. Maybe something like that, where it's like the Carson Mansion corridor, so you can go stand outside it and not be allowed in, you know.
And we kind of already
For
have
tourists.
that.
We have the
Don't
2nd
we?
Street Promenade, which is like the
Yeah,
fancy.
but it's kind of sad looking. It's been old.
Yeah,
It
and those
needs
are
some-
beautiful brick sidewalks. Yeah, but there isn't any like, you know, it's not.
Yeah.
Maybe there could be additional things done.
We will have design standards that will require a prominent street facing entrance with a connection to the sidewalk and your parking in the back.
landscaping between the building and the street.
I've seen a standard that also could like require or encourage in new development putting your communal living spaces in the front, like kitchen and living room, and not the bedrooms, so that it encourages people to have more windows facing the street. And
That's a
I
good
don't know,
idea.
there's things to do for residential.
Yeah, and I guess that's just like my little passion little thing. One other crazy idea, and I'm sorry, I just have to put this out there, even though we're at the kind of the 11th hour with this plan. But what if there was some sort of way to encourage like relocation of historic homes onto vacant properties along 2nd Street, or like if the Courtyard relocated, just ways to like create sort of a historic corridor leading up to the Carson Mansion. I don't know what that would look like, but just ways to.
We do
Continue.
own 2 very vacant parking lots across from the Adorney Center on that corridor. So
Yeah.
there is city-owned property that we could do whatever we like, you know, the city council wanted to with that.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll leave it there because I'm sure other commissioners have other comments.
I am wondering about you mentioned that the standards for alley access would change and less retail, but allowing office and retail. Has the city abandoned the kind of will to enhance Opera Alley and make it more of a thoroughfare?
Yeah. Talking with economic development, the alleys are definitely still utilized for waste pickup and vehicular access. So they're very functional. So we do want to make them nice, and the Opera Alley visioning plan definitely has made, and all the murals that got put in 2017. But I don't foresee additional, like anything that would prevent vehicular access for garbage trucks to keep going down the alleys. Is that what you're asking?
Well, I think what you had said was like the frontage of the street is going to be encouraged to be tourism facing, retail, whatever, but that on the backside on the alleys you would allow office and retail or residential. So I was just wondering, at some point there was that conversation that was going to become a lively thoroughfare, and to reduce some of the traffic and hide the garbage cans and do all that. But so you're saying that's been abandoned.
I would just add, I don't know if it's been abandoned, but really trying to focus on where we have existing pedestrian sidewalks. You know, we have really nice wide, 12-foot wide sidewalks. And when there's garbage trucks and vehicles and all the trash cans in the alleys, it does make it kind of unsafe, you know, so it is safer to promote pedestrians on the actual streets. But I don't think this is going to prohibit anyone from creating a storefront in the alley if they want.
Okay, cool.
Do you have thoughts on it?
Oh, I mean, I just, you know, now with like Friday night markets, and especially because it's just such a, you know, it's like 3 blocks. So, and it is a really cool cut through to get to places. If you walk around Old Town, I mean, I cut through Upper Alley all the time to hit up where like Madrone was, or, you know, get over the Fireman's Plaza. So, and, you know, adding the lights, especially for Arts Alive, it does like lend itself to being a really nice thoroughfare in that small area. But to your point, if I had a business there, if my restaurant was there, I would 100% want my garbage cans to be there and access to trucks. And so I see that as a complication. But I think when I had walked it with Rob a long time ago, probably 2018, it was like hiding the garbage cans, creating, you know, just making it look a little bit prettier, but still functional.
The dumpster situation is like a whole half-hour conversation. We've been, you know, it's a priority of the city council, and so economic development has been like trying to figure out how to address the dumpster problem, and it's just like our white whale. It's just like we're struggling with it.
And I get it, you know, like Charity at the Green Lily was just mentioning like how it's like legit dangerous when her late night bartender is like taking garbage out the back. So I get it. But to that point, if the garbage cans were in a way that was prettier and there was better lighting and it was a larger thoroughfare, then you could just kind of have that like safety in numbers mentality. So
I know
it's the two sides. So
I know.
I get it. I just wonder.
I don't know. I feel the same way.
But I guess too, yeah, if you added more residential, even if it was office, it could still enlighten that space. But it is a pretty cool old thoroughfare with some great history and the murals to kind of back that enjoyment of taking the shortcut.
I want to pivot just a little bit. I understand the emphasis on Old Town and visitor serving, but I want to ask about the commercial waterfront pieces. You know, what are the city's priorities there? You know, what's the good, the bad, and the ugly with that part?
Yeah, so with that part, that was kind of the sacrificial lamb, where I kept that everything except for coastal dependent, coastal related, and active uses would be conditional. Like everything is conditional except for coastal dependent, coastal related, and active uses. And my thinking on that was that everything there needs a coastal development permit anyway. So any development there has to go through a discretionary process anyway. And this would prove to the Coastal Commission that we're prioritizing the land that's actually on our waterfront for those priority uses. So that was my thinking with that. But I tried to, in the use table, under a lot of uses, there's this footnote 6, I think it is, which says it's allowed if it's coastal dependent or coastal related, to broaden the types of uses that might go down there. So like a yacht club, private club, I put, sure, that could be principally permitted if it's coastal dependent or related, or thinking that through. But we basically, what we heard is that people want an extension of Old Town on the western side of the commercial bayfront with the same vibe to the boardwalk. And then on the eastern bayfront, we called it Bayfront Flex because it won't have it. It's more lenient and would allow for bigger uses like the RV park and the Adorney Center and stuff like that. It's really interesting that the commercial bayfront is bookmarked by like Dick Taylor and Blue Ox, which are both like artisan manufacturing. And it was this warehouse district. So I almost wonder if artisan manufacturing could be something that, you know, and then thinking about a potential fish market, it all kind of goes together to me where it's kind of commercial / industrial. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Is there an update on that RV park that we permitted a while back?
The lot line adjustment is about to be recorded, and then the land can be transferred to Travis, and then he has some legal work to do to confirm underlying ownership of the streets that were going to be vacated, but that's getting close. He just has a couple legal things he has to do, and then, but I haven't seen any building permit, but
We have run into these title company issues.
yeah, so that's really what the holdup has been.
Lately, it's been a struggle with a lot of our projects because there's a lot of stuff that happened in Eureka prior to how things are done now with the Subdivision Map Act. And we've noticed the title company is less eager to take on any liability about or recognize our old maps as being evident of us owning our own streets.
Yeah. So I know Miles, city manager Slattery, this is priority of his. So I know he checks in with Mr. Schneider regularly about this.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask about the uses that I saw excluded from the table. And I think all of them are pretty good, but I just want to make sure. So I made a list of the ones that I saw no fit in the draft. So hospitals, kennel, animal boarding, vehicle towing and impound, vehicle repair, manufacturing light, manufacturing heavy, mini storage, outdoor storage, non-retail, agricultural processing, agriculture, animal processing, timber production and harvesting, emergency shelter, airport, freight terminals and transfer, and recycling processing facilities. So those I saw as all not allowed. Is that right? Under the
Correct.
okay. Were any of those ones where we struggled before we landed, or were they all pretty straightforward to exclude?
Some of them we struggled with, but then we created other use categories to deal with our struggles. So for instance, we don't want outdoor commercial retail unless it's like boats or kayaks. So, we allow it in the commercial bayfront if it's coastal and related. And then we added an outdoor market use type to capture, we heard a lot of people would love more outdoor market stuff. So,
and then these uses are only allowed in Bayfront Flex, which is RV parks and campgrounds and public agency courtyards. Does that sound right?
And the courtyard is only allowed if it's coastal dependent or related. And the reason I put that in there is because the Samoa boat launch is getting a storage facility for the boat for, Coast Guard. With a new bathroom. Super exciting.
Okay, and then this is something that came up when you were giving me your presentation. I didn't want to interrupt you, but is there an extensive number of grandfathered non-visitor serving uses within Old Town that are sort of known quantities at this point?
Right. When the students did their inventory, they found that almost a quarter of ground floor street facing uses were already offices in Old Town.
But they could be illegal offices.
We do know that a lot of businesses in Old Town do not have business licenses because of the conditional use permit, coastal development permit hurdle.
I mean, our code does have provisions for allowing or accepting uses that were established before the coastal zoning was applied in the 80s.
Yeah, if they're legal.
Yeah. But do we have much experience with people kind of like exploiting that and continuing to kind of lateral from use to use over the years to keep non-visitor serving uses within the these buildings?
Yeah.
I mean,
at a
we'd get
quarter,
business
I'm not
license
so the new one thing to highlight about this new proposed regulations is that it's actually harder on offices. It's basically saying no new offices, right? Because the Coastal Commission wanted a cap or a cap by block. And talking to Ben Noble, my consultant, he's like, that's so hard to track and implement. And he's like, well, if like a quarter feels like it's already, that's a good cap, and that's what we have. So basically we said no more offices in spaces that are assigned the active ground floor use limitation, unless you're already legally there, and then you can continue until and a new office can come in and continue until it stops being used for an office, and then you can no longer use it for an office.
But I think maybe, are you asking like the auto repair places and the towing, right? Is that what you're really asking for, like those legacy businesses
uses that would otherwise require a use permit or may not even be allowed, period.
Yeah, I mean, they probably were established before they needed anything, and they've been going on forever. And
I was just wondering how big of a population there is. I have ones that I would imagine are in that camp, but I don't know especially when it comes to non-visitor serving offices. I couldn't possibly, but that's fine. I just that seemed like that's a dynamic, but I don't know how big of a dynamic. Let's see. I saw in the parking section, it looked like we were citing the half mile to public transit, and so parking really didn't seem to be a component of development in the waterfront plan.
Yeah, we can't really require parking pretty much throughout the whole area, but there's a whole section in the plan that you'll see when it comes for adoption that's all about parking and then strategies to address parking. But it's not going to be requiring individual developments to have parking, or it's more like area-wise strategies. The thing for individual property owners we're considering, which is a implementation measure in the draft climate action plan, is that if you have 25 or more employees, or like a certain number of apartments or something, that you have a traffic management plan that we would approve through your business license, where you do things to encourage your employees to not use the single occupant vehicle to get to work. So like free bus passes, showers, and long-term bike storage, priority parking for people who are carpooling and having like a ride share program, that kind of, or even in your lease being restricted to 0 or 1 cars.
What about the in lieu fees that already apply to new development? Right, we do have a parking fee. No, yes.
We did have an in lieu fee, of $7,500 per parking space.
Does that get carried forward or go bye-bye?
Now we won't have any. We can't require parking, so then we can't charge the in lieu fee if you don't, because that was like if you weren't wanting to
But
supply.
I think since I've sat on the commission, we've had it on a couple projects. So
Yeah.
this is a new.
Yes,
When
we
did
had
this
it on
shake
the
out?
first Will Adams project, but
Yeah.
not the second Will Adams project, because the new state law about the not being allowed to require parking.
Gotcha.
But there is that thought, like, okay, do we need an assessment of some sort to pay for these district-wide
Right. Decouple it
strategies?
from parking.
Since we've gotten a parking enforcement officer, they've made a ton of money. So that's one pool of funding that we didn't have until we finally started enforcing on parking like this year. That's lucrative.
Yeah.
I have mixed feelings.
It's really important to manage your parking. It's supply and demand, right? You got to
Still
manage.
mixed feelings.
I do wonder. So under the new code, that parking lot that we approved, it looks like it's almost done next to the Bayfront restaurant.
Yeah.
Would not be permitted under once we get the new. No, it would be. You could. I mean.
Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it seemed like parking lots weren't.
But my question is I think that he was kind of holding off on developing that lot because of the current code.
No, they have already a coastal development permit for a hotel that they've had. It got permitted along with Bayfront one, and they just weren't ready. They didn't have the capacity to develop the hotel, but they needed to do something to close their contamination case. So that's why they had to put a cap on the site.
So then the section over there in front of the Mattakit Plaza cannot be used for parking.
No, you would have to hide the parking in the middle of buildings.
Cool. I mean, I honestly think parking should not be prioritized on the waterfront. It seems to me if you would back it off. So I think it's great. I think it's a great way to preserve the view and the vision, and walking through that dusty lot isn't super great for the boardwalk. So I think the long-term vision is really cool.
But a parking garage wouldn't have a home in any of the places in the waterfront plan? Like if there was going to be a parking garage developed?
Yeah, so a parking garage could be an accessory use to the, like, if you were going to develop that whole lot at once and you put a parking garage in the middle, right, with like storefronts around the sides. Yeah, I mean, parking, no, HTA, I think, is studying the feasibility of a parking structure.
Right.
I think parking structures, are you guys seeing something I'm not, where I don't allow parking structures?
Well, I mean, is that a use? Where would you identify that as a use? What would the closest description be for
So
that?
parking lots and structures are a use under commercial, service, and office, and they're allowed conditionally. But in the PFF, they would have to, in the pedestrian focused frontage, they would have to comply with those standards, which would mean they would have to be lined by active ground floor uses on their first floor.
Where are you?
It's P, so it's alphabetical under commercial, service, and office, page 104.
Okay, commercial service and office. I'm there. P.
Towards the bottom.
Oh, there it is. Yeah, there it is. Yeah. So it is allowed in every zoning district, but you're saying it's got some strings attached, obviously, in some of them.
It's conditional, too.
And we're the two pedestrian. So it looks like in Old Town zoning and Bayfront commercial, it includes that pedestrian frontage, additional focus frontage requirement with yeah.
Right. And so then if they would be subject to the idea that they need to have an active ground floor use and 65% transparency. So they would have to do something.
District or Bayfront Flex is just go for it. Like no
Right.
Okay, just
Well, they have to come to you, and then you have to tell them whether that you think it's appropriate or not, right?
I could see a parking lot in our future, and I would hate to think that we couldn't do it because
Sure, you could go one block down from the Mattakit Plaza.
Yeah. No, that's fine. Okay, so thanks for. I think I did have one other question, and then let's see.
I found an old general plan from a long time ago, from like the 70s or something. And even at that time, we were like, man, we have way too many of these like gap tooth surface parking lots. It'd be great if we just had one big parking structure instead.
Yeah. You keep alluding to comments from the coastal staff, and I guess I was curious about like sort of what revisions specifically were prompted, and then you were talking about kind of Bodega Bay and how maybe we can winnow down the visitor serving elements using the kind of more narrow focus, and I guess I'm just, what's your feeling about the current iteration of this? Is it going to be pushing the envelope when it comes to what the coastal staff are willing to tolerate based on their feedback? And could you summarize their feedback on the original?
Yeah, I should have included the cover letter. They gave me a cover letter, and then they edited the PDF, so I would have to give you the whole draft web to show, but the cover letter covers it, so I should have included that. I'll include it next month, but it was about not doing enough to prioritize visitor surveying and coastal dependent and related priority uses. And then we went on a walk around Old Town with the Coastal Commission last month, and I talked to them more about it. I showed them the Half Moon Bay stuff, and then we met with them yesterday, and I went through all this with them, and they said, "No, sounds good." So we'll see. We'll see when we submit it.
Okay. And the public outreach on this so far has been, I know there was a meeting here, right? And then what other?
There's a very long chapter on public outreach that will be included in the draft that you see next month. But I mean, it's continuing, right? Like we went on this walk with the students and a bunch of local businesses to talk about the active ground floor use thing, and then I went and reported at Main Street yesterday and the Coastal Commission. Like we just keep going.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. That's all I got.
Keep going. You're almost there. You're so close.
I know. We're almost there.
All right. Any further comments or questions? How about any other reports and communications? You wanna? All right. We'll adjourn.